And in this here and now, there of course is the once upon a time, the once upon a place, the once upon a territory not far from here. Or some people said 3 or 4 kingdoms or queendoms from here. Either way, when you tune in to the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker in this particular valley that we're now finding ourselves in, we would notice a lot of arguing and a lot of frustration and a lot of even anger and rage. Why? Because the water, the rain had not come for months now. And these poor villagers, all of them, were now finding it difficult to remain sane because at nighttime, without any of the rain coming during the day or the night, the howling bushels will roll through the center of town and cause ruckus, and the winds now were not able to be pushed back by the live trees. They were all had fallen over and had died off and turned into brambles that were just busting through the center courtyard of this village, running into people and bringing with it sand and dirt. People were staying at home at nighttime. The howling wind was so loud it caused people to scream with vexation. It was a very difficult time. There was no water for washing vegetables. There were no vegetables to be washed. There was no wounds. There was no water to wash the wounds with. There was no rain to wash ourselves with. It was a desperate situation that was going from bad to worse. People were staying in. They weren't even noticing sometimes what was going on. They were so busy on their cell phones or on the internet, even listening to weird Zoom storytelling calls. They were doing weird things and ordering coffee to be delivered from Starbucks. They were not even noticing now how things were going from bad to worse on the outside. This drought in the valley had been going on for months. The elders were meeting regularly, trying to come up with an antidote. The engineers from Harvard had come and gone, and they were unable to get the waters flowing. The meteorologists and even the weatherology people had arrived only to walk out of that village with their tail between their legs, their heads hanging low for the failure to not be able to bring any rain. And then in one of these meetings with the elders, one of them had remembered perhaps that storyteller 7.13 kingdoms over could be fetched. Perhaps a rainmaker could bring the rains for us. This drought has been going on for months. If we don't get it resolved this time round, we're going to have to be leaving this valley once and for all, or we're for sure to perish. Well, they sent the youngest and the strongest, didn't they? And they went, and he went 7.13 kingdoms over and brought back with him by the hand a rainmaker. Now, if you haven't seen a rainmaker, they're funny looking people. This one in particular was tall. He had a little grin on his face, and you could see a couple of lost teeth. You could see that his skin was well weathered from being out in the wilds. They all gathered around, that is, they, the village elders, the storytellers, the poets, everybody gathered to meet this last hope and see what in fact he actually looked like. And what is it that he needed, because they were going to do whatever it was to gather this man, a hut, it turns out, for 3 days, some coffee every now and again he asked for, and a couple of meals if that's at all possible too. He asked for these 3 things: a hut, a coffee, a meal every now and again, and 3 days. And he said, look, let me jump in here. When I look up at the sky and I look at the ground and I spit, I can tell that, I need to, I just need to get into this hut for 3 days. So that's what he did, didn't he? The first day goes by. Everybody's wondering. They're looking out their windows. There's still no rain. Oh my God, what's he doing in there? He was a funny looking fellow anyway. Are we sure he's the right guy for the job? They're asking. Day 2 rolls around, there's still no rain. Day 3, they're all carrying their people out and walking into the town square and gathering around the hut. Some now are cursing the hut and wondering, why hasn't he moved? Why hasn't things happened? And they're all starting to get frustrated even more now because yet again another night of no sleep and howling winds had kept them up. But all of a sudden, you know, in these stories, what happens? At that 11th hour, didn't the clouds start to come round? Didn't they get darker and darker? Wasn't there even a little bit of thunder and lightning threatening in the sky? People were starting to get a little grin on their face, at least those that could remember had a grin. And didn't they just notice that there were some rains coming their way and it seemed to take forever for it to land? It was a squeal and the delight of the little boys and the little girls running now through the fields, getting the dust and dirt all off them and letting the rain saturate the gullies. And you can hear the pounding of that rain now on top of the rooftop. You can feel the rain now arriving into all the crops. You can practically see the greenery starting to show up in all the crops that have been planted a long time. The farmers are looking at themselves thinking, oh my God, perhaps we can still get a crop out of this terrible beginning to this season. They couldn't help themselves. Every one of them gathered around the storyteller, who stuck his head out and got completely saturated with the rain and started out laughing out of the hut and stood up tall and just had a big grin on his face and couldn't believe his luck, I guess. And they all asked him, oh my God, it's a miracle. What were you doing in there? You've got to tell us a secret. It must be some alchemical treatment that you did to the land. It must have been you knew more than the Harvard people and the NASA people and the weatherology people. I mean, what secret do you know that nobody else knows? And finally they let him speak. And he only had this to say. He said, the truth is, you know, I'm a rainmaker. I'm a simple guy. I got here early that morning when you brought me in, and I felt my whole system was completely out of whack. My mind was going this way, my body was going that way, and my heart was just turning in circles and getting confused about the whole thing. And when I looked at the sky and I looked at the ground, I just knew that I needed 3 days in a hut with the odd cup of coffee and a meal every now and again. And I knew that that would bring me back into order. I'm not in charge of what happens outside of that. The fact that it starts raining or stops raining is not my business. But I tell you what, I'm sure glad to see the rain, and I can see it's going to make a difference for you, because now people's wounds were healing. They were being cleaned up. There was now some crops of vegetables and fruits to be washed. There was some clean people walking around with clean hair. It was quite a sight to behold. They danced and jumped, and they saw the Rainmaker leave the village that day, didn't they? They saw him off with a big grin on his face, and he said, thank you so much for the great visit. I'm very happy. I'll come again, I promise. To this day, they're still dancing. They're still celebrating, because they know they have the Rainmaker in the back of their pockets. If push comes to shove, they can find a way if the drought returns. But to this day, they haven't yet to had a return. They haven't had to return to ask the favor again. They've somehow been able to keep their little valley going, because somehow that Rainmaker woke up all the Rainmakers inside of them, and they all now have their own hut practices. Guess what, right? So that brings us into the end of the story, at the end of that chapter anyway. And I want to just say that we're going to officially end at that part.